Hi friends, let's make a high quality protein salad. The prep time is about 15 minutes and you can have this for breakfast, for lunch, or for dinner. Now the goal of each of the dishes that I'm going to show you is to pack it with anti-inflammatory and antioxidant power. And that's only maximized through color and eating above and below ground foods, as well as eating foods that activate your gut microbiome. If you don't have time to hear all of my explanations for why you should eat these foods daily, then feel free to skip to the desired chapter outlined in the show notes below. Now, here is the ingredient list. However, I want to highlight one particular vegetable, and that's called the sunchoke. And here it is. This is what the sunchoke looks like. It looks like a root. Not all stores have it, despite the fact that this is a Native American root vegetable. And you can cook it like a potato, or you can eat it raw like a jicama. Now, this is actually related to the sunflower and daisy. And the first thing you want to do is to scrub it well because it is in the dirt. You want to get rid of all the dirt. Now, when you pick one from the store, try to pick one without so many knobs because then it'll be more difficult to scrub. So when you chop it open, it looks as wide as a potato and it has a crunch of a jicama or a radish. Now, the sunchoke is not related to potato and the entire plant is edible. It actually has a low glycemic index of 32, whereas the white potato has a glycemic index of 60. And the worst food of all is white bread. That has a glycemic index of 100. So sunchokes are a great replacement for potatoes if you want that potato texture, but you don't want the calories from a starchy potato. So let's start with the salad. I aim for every salad to have at least 10 different ingredients, including leafy greens, fruits, other vegetables, beans, nuts, seeds, grains, and roots. Now, don't let perfect get in the way of good. Sometimes I don't get all these things in, and that's okay. Life is about trying. So I try to do it, and sometimes I just don't feel like eating something, and then I'll just make it the next meal. Now, you will find that when I cook, I use a variety of ingredients because diversity is the key to success, which is why I keep eating the foods that I eat. Have you ever spent hours slaving over the kitchen and then your family won't eat it? Yeah, that's me. So that's why I don't do that anymore for just one single dish. If a dish takes that long to make, I'm not even going to start. So my dishes are going to be efficient with diversity. And my personal goal is to spend the least amount of time in the kitchen and yet be able to meet my goals of having 50 different whole plant foods a week, including something new every week. Now, I can't do that unless every meal is packed with at least 10 different items. Sunchokes are not a plant I regularly eat. So this week, it is my new item. Before you do anything else, cook yourself some quinoa. So I am always looking for color. And this quinoa I have at Costco, it's white. It doesn't have that color, but they sell black quinoa. So first thing you want to do is rinse your quinoa before you cook it to get rid of any particles, maybe some natural fungus on it or things that give it a bitter, soapy taste. So I use a strainer like this and then a bowl. And I basically pour my quinoa in here and then I soak it in this bowl. And then I remove the strainer and then dump the water and I keep changing it. And I do this about maybe 4 or 5 times. Quinoa is a gluten-free semi-grain that is packed with fiber and protein. Technically, grains are all seeds of grasses, and quinoa is not technically a grass. Nevertheless, the seeds are the most nutritious parts of any plant. It's like the egg that grows into a new plant. Now, I like quinoa because it cooks in 15 minutes. So in a pot, put 1 3/4 cup of liquid with every dry cup of quinoa. You can use water and season it with the spices I have below, or use low sodium vegetable broth. Now, the broth can make a huge difference in how it tastes. And I will usually cook excess quinoa that can last for several meals. Now, 1 cup of dry quinoa will make about 3 servings, depending on how much you eat. So here I have already some quinoa that I made last night with millet. Now, my quinoa was red because I'm always looking for that pigment, and then the white is a millet. And I'm going to just use this in my salad. But while your quinoa is cooking, be sure to clean all your vegetables and then set those vegetables aside, except for the kale and the Napa cabbage, because they are 2 cruciferous vegetables. Now, when you chop them, you will absorb more nutrients if you let it sit for at least half an hour. Now, trapped in the kales are some of the most powerful antioxidants for you to eat. They are called sulfurophanes, and they need to be released. Enzymes in the kale called myrosinase, they need to convert precursor molecules called glucoraphanins into sulforophanes for your body to use. Now, in this whole leaf, they are kept in separate compartments until you chop it. So first, remember that you have to wash your kale well because broadleafy vegetables, they tend to trap pollutants in the air. Now, if you aren't used to eating kale, it is a bit fibrous and dry in texture, and the hardest part of the texture is the stem. And when you're learning how to eat your kale, you may want to remove the stem. The stem is very nutritious, but it's just hard and more difficult to chew on. So some people really don't like to eat that part. And it's really easy to remove. You just strip it like this. So now you just have the leaf. And if it doesn't come out when you strip it, then it's probably tender enough for you to chew. So I'm going to chop this kale into strips. And then I'm going to chop the strips at a 90-degree angle to get smaller pieces. When you're done chopping, set it aside in a bowl. The finer you chop your kale, the more palatable it will be. And plus, you're releasing more myrocinases to then make more sulforophanes. So if you chop about 3 leaves, that roughly makes 2 cups of chopped kale. Kale is a bitter leaf, and so it may take you a little bit of time to get used to eating it, but it is well worth it. And to be honest, I never liked eating greens either, and they were my least favorite vegetable to eat. But Mom just kept making and serving them and asked me to take a bite. She would never just serve one vegetable. Every night, it was like a Chinese buffet at our dinner table with probably at least 10 dishes. Now, I don't cook like my mom, but I try to apply those principles in whole foods for my kids. So every night we have a variety of whole foods to choose from. But I always have my go-to vegetables that we eat on a daily basis. And in my family, that is kale. Now, my kids used to complain because I would hide kale in everything that I made. I baked with it. I made pancakes with it. I stir-fried kale. I put it in soups. I put it in smoothies as well as in juices. Now, my oldest would always tell me before he ate any food, did you put any kale in it? Because if there's kale in it, I'm not eating it. So basically, I stopped telling them what I put in their food. And I just say, eat it, it's good for you. And now my son has learned that kale is very good for him and he will ask for it. So for you moms who are struggling to increase your kids' vegetable intake, just keep trying. Now, if you don't try, nobody else will, and they will grow up not eating any vegetables. So this is Napa Cabbage. It is sweeter than kale, and it has a crunch. And you may want to put more Napa Cabbage than kale when you are learning to eat cruciferous vegetables. Now I'm going to chop this in strips and add it to my kale. Napa Cabbage is also a cruciferous vegetable, and it also has sulforophanes. It is great to add to soups because it makes a sweet broth. And Asians, we love to eat it with hot pots where you cook soup while you're eating dinner. And we also put it in fillings for dumplings, or you can saute this by itself. You can also eat it raw, like what we're going to do. And some people enjoy it fermented. This is what makes kimchi. Now be sure to take each leaf and scrub it well because the leaves, it can hide dirt and bugs and other things can be trapped at the bottom near the stem. Now people think that cabbages, because they grow so tightly in a ball or a head, that inside the leaves are clean, but that's actually far from the truth. Many cabbages may last longer than delicate leaves like spinach, and this gives people a false impression that they don't have germs. But actually, they have more germs because it gets trapped inside, and since this is a hardier plant, germs actually replicate for longer. And when you don't clean inside the leaves, oftentimes that's where you can get food poisoning. So it's important to peel every leaf apart with your hand like this and scrub it underneath the sink. Sometimes it can trap pathogenic bacteria like Listeria that could cause deadly diseases. So this is a common cause of food poisoning, especially if you decide to ferment your cabbages. So many cultures, they have their own versions of pickled cabbage, and kimchi is a popular Asian pickled cabbage dish. They are very tasty, but I'm actually not a fan of pickled vegetables because preserved salted foods, both fish and vegetables, are associated with a higher rate of gastric cancers. Now, I know some people like to drink the pickle juice. Well, pickled vegetable juice extracts cause DNA damage in cells in the petri dish, and it can irritate the cells in your stomach. Persistent irritation causes DNA mutation. And I know this goes against a lot of what you may be hearing online from prominent gut microbiome researchers, medical doctors, and influencers looking out for your gut health, especially your gut microbiome. Now, I don't disagree that you can diversify your gut microbiome eating pickled fermented foods, but you may be doing that at the expense of your stomach health. There is a well-established link between salted preserved foods and gastric cancer, and stomach cancer rates are increasing, especially in women under 50. So until somebody proves to me that eating pickled vegetables isn't going to increase my rate of stomach cancer, I just simply won't eat fermented salted foods. Personally, I don't think it's worth the risk, especially when you're fermenting the wrong bacteria. Whether that's Salmonella, E. coli, or Campylobacter, you can get more than just a short course of food poisoning. Bacteria such as Campylobacter are well known to cause life-threatening autoimmune diseases or chronic lifelong symptoms such as irritable bowel syndrome. I have seen people get Guillain-Barré syndrome that can cause paralysis of the breathing muscles. 1 in every 1,000 cases of Campylobacter can end up with Guillain-Barré. And people can also get arthritis of the knee or the spine, known as Reiter syndrome. In the bacteria lipopolysaccharide cell wall, there's a molecule mimicking a molecule in human nerve cells. This is called molecular mimicry, sort of like the movie The Parent Trap, in which the parents think that they have the right twin, but they actually have the wrong twin. So the body thinks that it's attacking bacteria, but in fact, the immune system ends up attacking self. And a lot of pathogens can do this. Now, the reason why cabbages can get pathogenic strains of bacteria is because farmers are growing them next to animals. So the runoff from the animals when it rains is full of germs like bacteria that contaminate low-growing vegetables. Now, you would think there should be a law against this type of farming practice. Let me show you my red walnut. I recently found this, and this is the first time I'm trying it. So I was thrilled to find red walnuts because I'm always looking for red or purple pigmented foods. Now, walnuts can be a little bitter, and you can get rid of that bitterness by cooking them. Let me show you how to make your walnut a little sweeter without adding processed sugar. So in a pot, I'm gonna add a cup of water, and then I'm gonna put my prunes in here and to cook it together. Now, if you're in a hurry, chop up your prunes to release more flavor more quickly. So I'm gonna coarsely chop it and bring it to a boil, and then I'm gonna add anise seed to give it a subtle, extra licorice-like flavor. And you can just put everything together in the water and then let it simmer. Now, you can reuse this anise seed several times for many meals throughout the day. So when I'm done with this sauce, I'm gonna save it and use it to cook maybe a soup or make a broth for another dish. But be careful that you're getting Chinese star anise seed and not the Japanese star anise, which contains a neurotoxin that can be toxic to kids. It's really hard to tell them apart. So I would make sure that you buy it from a reputable company because sometimes the Chinese star anise can be contaminated with the Japanese star anise. After it boils for 5 minutes, I will add my nuts to soften it and give it a hint of sweetness without coating it with processed sugar. So these walnuts, I found them at a farm. Walnuts are one of those nuts that I try to eat every day because it has a good amount of omega-3 fatty acids that's so good for my brain and nervous system. You can add walnuts to your salad or you can blend it in the dressing and it'll make the dressing more creamy. But if you don't want to gain weight, then you really don't want to blend fatty foods. When you blend foods, it makes the food more calorically dense because you're increasing the surface area and you're also eating more food with less volume. I like to eat more volume, so I think I'm full. And then in fact, if I'm eating low calorie foods, I'm eating less calories, but more volume. So this is why I stick to high volume, low calorie foods like salads, at least for one meal. Now, after a couple minutes, I'm going to take the walnuts out. Otherwise, it'll just get softer and I really want to keep that crunchy walnut texture. So this sauce is actually the base of the ginger plum dressing, which is essentially the start of many of my broths and dressings. When the walnuts are done, I will take them out and then I'm going to put ginger root, garlic, onion powder, and cayenne pepper to taste. And then I'm going to let that simmer for a few more minutes. Now, while that's cooking, let's go over why I chose these ingredients besides the taste. Now, I have here young ginger. I also have old ginger. And I also have powdered ginger. The young ginger is less fibrous and it can be eaten like a vegetable. It's still spicy, but not quite as spicy as the old ginger. This is really tough. And it's going to be harder to eat it like a vegetable because it's very fibrous. So you're going to have to chop this into finer pieces and maybe even mince it. Now, I think the young ginger is less spicy and the old one is more spicy. But if you want something even less spicy, then go for the ginger powder. If I want to make a ginger broth or a ginger tea, this stuff is just fine. It's also cheaper than the young ginger. The powdered ginger has the mildest flavor. So if you're just starting, you may want to start with the powdered ginger. Now, this powder is actually advantageous for people who don't like the overwhelming flavor of ginger, so that you can put it in your food, get the gingerol, the bioactive compound that has anti-inflammatory properties. Now, ginger reduces inflammation by inhibiting the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines that can make you feel bad. It's been found to be effective in managing inflammation associated with osteoarthritis, muscle soreness, and migraine headaches, amongst other inflammatory conditions. Now, just 1/8 of a teaspoon of powdered ginger with water seems to do a trick for people with headaches and appears to work just as well as ibuprofen without the dangers of stomach ulcers and kidney failures of NSAIDs. Now, I actually use ginger for motion sickness. Sitting in any moving vehicle either rocks me to sleep or makes me puke. And ginger has been shown to reduce all kinds of reasons to get nauseated, from cars to chemotherapy to pregnancy. Now, my dad made me drink super concentrated ginger tea. It wasn't this stuff. He basically put a pot full of this stuff. Whenever I got a cold, that's what I would get. And I never missed a day of school from first grade until college. He wouldn't give me antibiotics. He wouldn't give me pain meds, antihistamines, decongestants, cough suppressants. Basically, I never even knew those things existed until I went off to college and went to the student health center on my own one day. But in college, I didn't eat the diet I ate when I was at home. I stopped drinking ginger. It's obviously not that tasty. I also didn't believe that it worked. That's probably why I suffered horrible allergies in college. Now, although it is safe to eat when you're pregnant, you don't want to overdo ginger, as it can stimulate your uterus to contract. Garlic is another spice that's in my DNA. My dad loved garlic and ate bulbs of raw garlic. In fact, he would carry his own garlic to restaurants, as they never gave him enough raw garlic to eat with his meals. I don't think they understood how much my dad loved raw garlic. He ate it like a vegetable. Now, all of my kids, even the pickiest eater, fight over garlic. Garlic is a popular spice known for its numerous health benefits, including its anti-inflammatory and DNA protective properties. Now, if you eat garlic, it can also lower your risk of benign prostate hypertrophy, which is painful when it causes obstruction or urinary tract infections. Now, as women, we don't need to worry about prostates. But I eat garlic because of its anti-infective properties, and it's being studied in common colds to reduce bacterial infections in those with chronic respiratory diseases like cystic fibrosis. Now, how does that work? Well, people who eat garlic, they have garlic breath. And it's not just coating their tongue and their mouth. In fact, it's in their breath. You actually absorb the ingredients that enter your bloodstream, and then that's released in your lungs. Now, how did they prove that? Well, they gave people garlic enemas. That doesn't sound too pleasant. However, I can imagine, as an infectious disease doctor who treats recurrent pneumonias, how powerful that could be to prevent respiratory germs. Now, if you like spicy, then you'll probably need more cayenne pepper, because when you cook garlic, you lose some of that spice. And you'll be surprised to learn that I actually never liked spicy foods. I had to train myself. And my son was the same way. In fact, when he was a child, he would only eat very bland, salty, white colored foods. But now he loves spicy foods. You just need to keep trying it over and over, and eventually you'll learn to love it. Now, cayenne pepper contains capsaicin, a compound responsible for its spicy taste and its anti-inflammatory properties. Capsaicin can help reduce inflammation by inhibiting the activity of inflammatory markers that interact with your nervous system. It's been studied for its potential benefits for managing pain and inflammation associated with arthritis and psoriasis. It's found commonly in topical joint creams. It also helps with cluster headaches. Just 1.5 teaspoons of cayenne pepper appears to be helpful for those with irritable bowel pain or chronic indigestion. Now, I can't eat that much in one setting unless I swallow it in a capsule. Over time, capsaicin works better because it depletes substance P so that neurons can't sense pain. Now, some people may need more than a week to feel benefit. Now, I like it because it helps me with weight loss. It's like a workout without having to physically work out. So by the way, in case you didn't know, my sauce is made from dried prunes, which are basically plums. And I've been working on incorporating more prunes in my diet because of its beneficial effects on bone remodeling. So when the dressing cools down, pour the dressing in a tall container to blend it. Now I like my hand blender because it's so convenient to use and clean. So I basically assemble it and then I get the container and I put it in. Now, if you have insulin resistance, blending fruit will release the sugars and make your blood sugars rise even more. So you should work on fixing the insulin resistance. Now, one thing that I do after I eat is I take a 10-minute walk. Now, my brother has been doing this for years. He's been a health fanatic since I was in high school. And when you walk, what you're doing is stimulating your muscles, which are the only metabolic organs that you can actively change and see that change. Larger muscles will literally take in more blood sugars, and this will help you improve your insulin resistance. So the more you move your muscles, especially after you eat, the more your blood sugars will stay normal. And if you jumpstart your diet and focus on high fiber, high antioxidant rich foods, then you can really see this change in a matter of days. Now, this is why when you're on any medications for blood sugar or blood pressure control, you need to work with your doctor or you may bottom out your numbers and not feel good. Now, as the dressing is cooking, remember to chop your other ingredients like the red onions, the apples, cilantro, and the sunchoke. So let me show you a trick to chopping and cleaning the onions. The outside is the dried skin, and you probably don't want to eat that. It's edible, but it doesn't taste good. Now, underneath is a layer that is going to be dehydrating. And oftentimes this layer also has trapped in it dirt. So you want to inspect that at least the first few rings before you cut into it in case it's rotten. Now, if so, I would just throw the whole thing away. But if you can salvage it, then you just need to be able to wash the rest of it well. Now, I try to eat onions at least once a day because they have a lot of quercitin. Quercitin is an antioxidant that works synergistically with vitamin C as well as turmeric. Now, I found this study that showed that the combination of quercitin and curcumin that's found in turmeric reverse colonic polyps in people genetically predisposed to get polyps. So that's why I target foods rich in quercetin like onions. Now, because onions are round, it's going to roll. And that means it's high risk to slip and have a knife accident. So I always make the first cut far from my hand to make it flat. Now, you want to keep the head on, which is this side, so that you can slice it more evenly. I'm going to make multiple parallel slices from the bottom up. And then I'm going to make perpendicular slices so that you start making cubes. Now with practice, it'll be more uniform, but if you're eating on your own, it really doesn't matter what it looks like. Now next, you can chop the apples the same way as the onions, and the apples will give your salad a hint of sweet and crunch. So let me show you also how to chop the cilantro. It's actually pretty easy. I just roll it up like this, then I start mincing this ball. And just a reminder, all these vegetables, they need to be pre-washed. Cilantro, I know, is also an acquired taste, and some people either love it or they hate it. And really, almost every herb is an acquired taste. Now, I grew up with cilantro, but it was really never my favorite thing to eat. But I seek it now because cilantro has been shown to reduce uric acid levels as well as inflammation in those with arthritis. In addition, it's been shown to inhibit the absorption of heavy metals in food. Now, I generally chop it up and sprinkle it on savory dishes and salads. I have one golden rule for cilantro. And that is if I can't wash it myself, I'm not going to eat it. It's been known to be associated with foodborne outbreaks. Now let's talk about our featured vegetable, the sunchoke. This is a rhizome or the root of the plant. And the flower has a hint of a chocolate flavor. Now, I've never tasted the flower before, so if you have, please let me know if it's true in the comments below. Now, another name for the sunchoke is called Jerusalem artichokes, but it actually has no connection with Jerusalem. However, it's been eaten by many Native Americans, especially during times of starvation. Famous American explorers like Lewis and Clark actually dined on them in North Dakota. The root is what people actually eat, and as you can see, it looks similar to ginger. And when I first saw them, I really thought they were an herb, but they're actually a vegetable, and you can eat it raw. It has a crispiness of a radish. However, when you cook it, the texture turns into a potato. Now, when you're buying sunchoke, look for one that doesn't have any dark spots or holes. And if you avoid the knobs, then it'll be easier to clean. The root is packed with potassium and iron, and it has no dietary fat. Now, all of the plant is edible, but it does have a particular fiber called inulin. Now, you may have noticed that inulin is one of the ingredients used in many kinds of processed foods, from breads to breakfast cereals. Inulin is a soluble dietary fiber called fructan, which are chains of fructose molecules linked together. And this is a great prebiotic for your gut microbiome. That's also why sunchokes are called fart chokes, because when your gut microbiome digests food, it will produce gas. But if you're constipated or sensitive to gas bubbles, you may feel uncomfortable. Now, did you know that most people, they fart between 12 to 25 times a day? And some people even fart 40 times a day. Your fart is actually flammable because it contains hydrogen and methane gas. Farting is normal, and everyone should do it. In fact, after surgery, you won't be able to leave the hospital unless you fart. And if you don't fart, you may not even get to eat any food. When you do fart, we know your bowels are waking up. Now, practically speaking, you need to be able to fart or belch, or your guts will literally explode and spill toxic microbes into your bloodstream or into your abdominal cavity. Farting are foods that are low in fiber, such as meat, or taking narcotics that interfere with the signaling to move your muscles. Your intestines are long, muscular tubes. They are designed to go one direction south, but it can't do it on its own. It needs input from your nervous system as well as your gut microbiome. The largest nerve outside of your central nervous system is the vagus nerve that innervates your entire abdominal cavity, and it has a direct connection to your brain. This is why when you don't feel well or when you have emotional ups and downs, it affects your gut. And when you're anxious, you may throw up. I had a classmate in medical school who threw up before every test. That's a lot of vomit as we were testing all the time. Some people get diarrhea and other people get constipated. So your emotional health often will affect your gut health, and your gut health in turn will affect your emotional health. Now, I get motion sickness all the time, riding in vehicles, in planes, in trains, and boats, and cars. They all give me motion sickness. And if you've ever had motion sickness, you know how it feels. You're basically on the brink of throwing up every few minutes. Now, motion sickness is a problem with my inner ear, but it manifests as a gastrointestinal problem. And that's why I never wanted to be an astronaut. But now I rarely have that problem unless it's really turbulent. And the way I prevent motion sickness is through feeding my gut ginger, which interacts with my vagus nerve. So that's why I make sure I eat ginger daily. Now, I mentioned that sunchokes have inulin, which is a prebiotic fiber. When your gut microbiome gets fiber, it makes short-chain fatty acids such as butyrate. Butyrate is necessary for your colonic cells to have energy. It's literally the fuel molecules. So if you're not making butyrate locally, then the cells can't contract. And if it can't contract, then literally you're not going to be able to poop. Now, there's two problems with farting, actually three. Number one, it's uncomfortable. And number two, it smells bad if you eat the wrong foods. And the third problem is that it is embarrassing. My son struggled with toxic smelling flatulence as a child, and he had a course of antibiotics as a baby despite my reservations. Now, I'm thankful he was born after the discovery of antibiotics, or he would just be another statistic on the infant mortality list. As a result of the antibiotic use, it was just a couple of weeks. His gut microbiome changed, but his poop didn't smell bad until we started to feed him chicken. And when I gave him antibiotics as a baby, I saw his gut microbiome change. He had loose stool, which had a different scent. That diarrhea, that burned his bottom badly, despite using my favorite go-to skin cream, Desitin. Now, if I had known that we were going to start antibiotics, I would have coated his little bottom before we even gave him the first dose. Now, after the diarrhea, when he started solid foods, he struggled with constipation despite eating what we considered was a balanced diet. And as he grew older, we gave him more solid food and noticed his flatulence smelling even worse. At the time, we drove a minivan, and even though he sat way in the back, whenever he farted, everyone had to roll down the windows, including the driver. And it wasn't until he went predominantly plant-based did he relieve his constipation and his foul-smelling flatulence. Now, obviously, his family was thrilled. Do you know why he did it? A teacher in junior high challenged his class to go plant-based for a month, and so he did. Now, I'm not sure who that teacher is, but I want to thank that person for encouraging my son to eat better. Now, it's been several years since that challenge, and he is still eating a predominantly whole food, plant-centered diet. So let's assemble all the ingredients and put the leafy beans on the bottom. Now, I want to show you my tomatoes. Here I have some heirloom tomatoes, and you see how this is kind of a wrinkly skin, whereas this is a common cherry tomato. It's smooth and round. Did you know that tomatoes are actually considered a vegetable, even though it's scientifically a fruit? And that's what happens when government just makes things up. Now, if you can, get your tomatoes from a farmer's market. It's worth it. Vine-ripened tomatoes are best, and heirloom tomatoes are often more flavorful than common tomatoes. Heirlooms supposedly have not been crossbred or genetically modified. Tomatoes are actually a native plant of South America, and they were introduced to Europe in the 16th century by Spanish explorers. Now, many people actually believed the tomato plant was poisonous, so they were afraid to eat it. They weren't too far off. Tomatoes belong to the nightshade family, and the root, the stem, the leaves, they are poisonous. They have a neurotoxin called solanine. So don't eat any part of the plant but the tomato fruit. Now, I'm usually going to even cut the head off. So when I take that off, I'm going to usually cut that stem off. Now, tomatoes weren't actually introduced to the Americas until the 1700s. And today, it's a billion-dollar industry, with the U.S. being the second largest producer, but the world's largest producer of fresh tomatoes. But initially, people here were also afraid to eat them because they believed in the rumor that tomatoes were poisonous. The plants are actually kind of ugly. And apparently, tomatoes are an acquired taste because there are acids as well as bitter ingredients that make the tomatoes' flavor profile. Now, today, the average American eats 19 pounds of tomatoes a year. Now, this includes pizza, ketchup, and spaghetti sauce. So if you ate some ketchup for the day, you still really haven't eaten any vegetables. Sadly, the consumption of tomatoes pales in comparison to the consumption of table sugar. The average American eats 60 pounds of table sugar. Now, if you think about it, 19 pounds of tomatoes is mostly water, whereas 60 pounds of table sugar is 100% sugar. Now, if you find a truly fresh, vine-ripened tomato like this, it will taste better than pure sugar. It's delicious, it's nutritious, and there's no guilt when you eat it. Now, be sure to store them at room temperature, as the cold will make the tomatoes turn mealy. But don't throw that tomato away, just cook it and make a sauce. The darkest tomatoes, they have the most phytonutrients like this one. So whenever you can, look for the brownish heirloom tomatoes. Now, my first college roommate, she taught me how to make this tomato dessert where you stick a sugary dried Asian plum in the middle of the tomato and let it sit overnight. It was the best and only tomato dessert I have ever had. However, I won't eat those things anymore because they're just full of sugar and preservatives. I have to admit, tomatoes are a very special fruit. They have anti-cancer pigments called lycopenes, which is mostly in the outer skin of tomatoes. And that's why I love the smallest tomatoes, as they have the most skin. Men who ate lycopene-rich tomatoes daily for 3 weeks had improved prostate function and lower PSA levels. High lycopenes were also associated with a reduced risk of breast cancer. When you cook tomatoes, that heat, that's going to increase the amount of lycopene that you can absorb in your body. So cooked tomato dishes are excellent. But honestly, I just simply enjoy the mouthfeel and texture and flavor of fresh tomatoes. Now, my heirloom tomatoes, they're from a local farmer and it's super sweet. And I smell that fragrance just plucking off that stem. So you can chop your tomatoes and make them look even, or just throw them in. And don't forget to add your quinoa and then top it off with balsamic vinegar as well as your blended dressing. And now you have yourself a delicious meal. And to this, you can simply open a can of beans and add a few scoops of it after you rinse it. Now, if you have high blood sugars, adding those beans are really important. And if you want to know why, watch the next video.